Zig Ziglar was born in 1926 in Coffee County, Alabama, in a rural area where life was simple but often difficult. His family did not live in comfort. They did not have financial security. What they had instead was determination, faith, and the daily responsibility of survival. Zig was one of many children in the family, and resources were always limited. Every meal, every pair of shoes, every school supply had value because nothing came easily. When Zig was still a young boy, tragedy entered his life without warning. His father passed away suddenly after suffering a stroke. The event shocked the entire family. There had been no long illness, no preparation. One moment his father was present, strong, and guiding the household. The next moment he was gone. As if that were not enough, his younger sister died shortly afterward. The emotional impact was overwhelming. What happens to a child when stability disappears so quickly? Does he become fearful? Does he lose confidence in the future? In Zig's case, he experienced grief and confusion, but something else slowly developed inside him. He began observing human strength. His mother suddenly became the central pillar of the family. She had lost her husband and a child, yet she did not collapse emotionally in front of her children. She worked hard. She maintained discipline. She encouraged responsibility. Zig later spoke about how his mother's quiet strength influenced him deeply. She did not give long motivational speeches. Instead, she modeled resilience through action. The family moved several times as financial pressure increased. Sometimes they struggled to pay bills. Sometimes food was simple and limited. There were no luxuries. Yet Zig noticed something important during those years. Hardship did not automatically destroy dignity. A person could remain hopeful even when circumstances were unstable. As a teenager, Zig began working to support himself and contribute to the family. He took small jobs. He learned quickly that effort and reward were directly connected. Nothing would be given freely. If he wanted improvement, he would have to earn it. After serving in the Navy during World War II, Zig entered the world of sales. At first, sales was not glamorous. It was exhausting. He went door to door selling cookware and household products. Many people rejected him immediately. Some shut the door without listening. Others criticized his presentation. Rejection became part of his daily routine. How would most people respond to constant rejection? Would they quit? Would they assume they were not talented enough? Zig faced these same thoughts. There were evenings when he returned home feeling discouraged and tired. Yet he made a different decision. Instead of blaming customers, he began analyzing himself. He asked simple but powerful questions. Why did one family agree to buy while another refused? Why did some conversations feel natural and positive while others felt uncomfortable? Was it price? Was it personality? Was it trust? These questions changed his mindset. Sales stopped being a struggle and became an experiment. He began studying human behavior. He listened carefully to experienced salesmen. He attended training sessions. He read books about communication and persuasion. He practiced speaking more clearly. He adjusted his posture. He improved eye contact. Gradually, small improvements appeared. A few more sales each week. A few more satisfied customers. More importantly, he noticed that when he genuinely cared about helping people, results improved naturally. He discovered that selling was not about pressure. It was about understanding needs and offering solutions. This realization shaped his entire philosophy. He later expressed it in one of his most famous ideas. You can have everything in life you want if you will just help enough other people get what they want. That principle did not appear overnight. It was born from thousands of conversations at front doors across America. At this stage of his life, Zig was not yet a famous motivational speaker. He was simply a hard-working salesman trying to master his craft. But internally, a transformation was happening. He was building discipline. He was building confidence. He was building belief. And belief is powerful. What is belief? It is the quiet decision that effort will eventually produce results. It is the refusal to let temporary failure define permanent identity. Zig began to believe that success followed patterns. If he could identify the patterns, he could repeat them. He noticed that successful people tended to share certain habits. They woke up early. They prepared carefully. They respected others. They maintained optimism even during difficulty. These were not mysterious secrets. They were behaviors. This discovery gave him hope. If success was behavior, then it could be learned. And if it could be learned, then anyone with discipline could improve. By the time Zig reached his late 20s, he was no longer simply surviving. He was growing. His communication skills strengthened. His understanding of human psychology deepened. Most importantly, he developed the conviction that attitude influences outcome. He had experienced loss, financial instability, and rejection. Yet none of those experiences stopped him. Instead, they trained him. Looking back, one might ask, was adversity an obstacle or an advantage? For Zig Ziglar, it became preparation. And this preparation would soon lead him toward a new path, not just selling products, but selling ideas. Ideas about growth. Ideas about confidence. Ideas about setting goals clearly and pursuing them with consistency. The foundation was complete. The speaker had not yet appeared on stage, but the mindset of a future leader had already formed. By the time Zig Ziglar gained more experience in sales, something inside him had begun to change. He was no longer simply trying to survive each week. He was beginning to understand patterns of success more clearly. Every rejection now felt less personal and more instructional. Every successful sale felt less accidental and more predictable. He noticed that confidence was not something people were born with. It was something built slowly, through preparation and repetition. In the early days, his voice sometimes shook when he knocked on a stranger's door. He worried about saying the wrong words. He worried about being judged. But after hundreds of conversations, those fears began to lose their power. Why? Because experience reduces fear. The unknown is always intimidating. But once something becomes familiar, it becomes manageable. Zig realized that growth requires entering uncomfortable situations repeatedly until they become comfortable. At this stage of his career, he was selling cookware for a company called Wherever. It was not glamorous work. He carried heavy sample cases from house to house. He demonstrated pots and pans in kitchens while families observed carefully. Sometimes he succeeded in making a sale. Sometimes he left empty-handed. Yet something important happened during those kitchen demonstrations. He began observing emotional responses more closely. He noticed that customers were rarely making decisions based only on logic. They were influenced by feeling. If they trusted him, they listened longer. If they felt respected, they became open. If they sensed honesty, they relaxed. This discovery changed his entire approach. He stopped focusing only on product features. Instead, he focused on people. He asked questions. He listened carefully. He paid attention to tone. He adapted his explanations to match the needs of each family. Slowly, sales numbers improved. But more importantly, his understanding of human motivation deepened. He began asking himself larger questions. What truly motivates people to act? Is it fear? Is it desire? Is it hope? Through observation, he concluded that hope is stronger than fear. People move forward when they believe improvement is possible. When they imagine a better version of their life, they become willing to invest effort. This insight planted a new idea in his mind. Selling products was useful, but selling belief was powerful. Around this time, Zig attended motivational seminars and training events organized by his company. He listened to speakers who addressed large audiences. Some speakers inspired him deeply. Others felt mechanical and unconvincing. He noticed something interesting. The speakers who truly influenced the audience were not simply delivering information. They were transferring energy. Their words carried conviction. Their personal stories created connection. Zig began imagining himself on stage. Could he do that? Could he speak in front of large groups? Did he have something meaningful to share? At first, the idea seemed unrealistic. He was a salesman, not a public figure. But the desire continued growing quietly. He started volunteering to speak during company meetings. At first, it was brief. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. He shared practical techniques that had improved his own sales performance. Colleagues listened carefully. Some approached him afterward to ask questions. They appreciated his clarity and enthusiasm. These small experiences strengthened his confidence. Confidence, he realized, is not built in isolation. It grows when effort produces visible results. Gradually, Zig's focus shifted from personal sales success to teaching others how to succeed. He discovered that helping colleagues improve gave him even greater satisfaction than closing his own deals. Watching someone else achieve growth because of his advice created a new sense of purpose. What is purpose? It is the feeling that your work benefits others. This realization transformed his ambition. He no longer wanted only financial stability. He wanted influence. He wanted to help people unlock potential they did not yet see in themselves. During the 1960s and early 1970s, the American business environment was expanding rapidly. Companies were searching for new methods to motivate employees and increase productivity. Training programs became more common. Zig recognized an opportunity. He refined his communication style. He practiced storytelling. He incorporated humor into serious lessons. He spoke about attitude, discipline, and goal setting with clarity. Instead of abstract theory, he used relatable examples from his own life. Audiences responded positively. He often reminded listeners that success is not accidental. It is intentional. Goals must be defined clearly. Actions must align with objectives. Attitude must remain constructive. He also addressed doubt directly. Many people believe they were limited by background, education, or past mistakes. Zig challenged that belief. He encouraged individuals to examine their internal dialogue. What are you telling yourself daily? Are you speaking words of possibility or limitation? He argued that self-talk shapes behavior. If a person repeatedly says, "I cannot," effort decreases. But if a person begins saying, "I am learning," progress accelerates. These ideas may seem simple, yet simplicity is often powerful. Zig did not present complicated theories. He presented practical principles that could be applied immediately. His reputation grew steadily. Companies invited him to speak at conferences. Sales organizations requested workshops. His energy on stage became well known. He combined optimism with discipline. He balanced encouragement with responsibility. By this point, his identity had shifted fully. He was no longer only a salesman. He was becoming a teacher of motivation. However, success did not eliminate challenges. Public speaking required preparation. Travel was exhausting. Maintaining authenticity while speaking repeatedly about similar themes required focus. Zig disciplined himself to continue reading, learning, and refining his ideas. He understood something essential: growth must continue, even after recognition appears. As his influence expanded, one central theme became clear in his message. Clear goals change behavior. This belief would soon be summarized in one of his most famous statements: "A goal properly set is halfway reached." But before that statement became widely quoted, it was lived. It was tested in kitchens, in sales meetings, and in personal struggles. It was proven through repetition. And the foundation for his philosophy was now solid. The salesman had become a communicator. The communicator was becoming a leader. As Zig Ziglar entered the next stage of his career, his ideas about success began to solidify into a structured philosophy. He was no longer simply sharing personal stories. He was building a framework, a system that others could follow. By the late 1960s, his speaking engagements were increasing. Companies invited him not only to energize employees, but also to teach long-term performance principles. The business world was changing rapidly. Competition was growing. Productivity and morale were becoming central concerns. Zig noticed something consistent across different audiences. Whether he spoke to executives, sales teams, or students, the same invisible barrier appeared again and again. Unclear direction. Many people were working hard. They were busy. They were active. Yet they were not progressing meaningfully. Why? Because activity is not the same as direction. Zig began emphasizing this distinction strongly. Movement alone does not guarantee progress. A person can move quickly in the wrong direction and end up further from their goal. During one corporate seminar, he asked participants to write down their professional goals. The room became quiet. Pens moved slowly. Some participants hesitated. Others stared at blank pages. After several minutes, Zig asked, "How many of you have written specific, measurable goals?" Only a small number raised their hands. He then asked, "How many of you believe you are working toward success?" Almost every hand went up. The contrast was striking. How can someone move toward success without clearly defining it? This observation reinforced his belief that clarity precedes achievement. Around this time, Zig refined one of his most repeated principles. You must define what you want before you can reach it. General ambition is insufficient. Precision creates power. He often explained that the brain functions like a guidance system. If the destination is unclear, the system cannot calculate the path. If the destination is specific, the mind begins searching for solutions automatically. Consider a simple example. If someone says, "I want better English," the brain has no clear instruction. But if someone says, "I will improve my listening skills by practicing 30 minutes daily for 3 months," the mind begins organizing behavior around that target. Zig also recognized that goals influence emotional stability. When individuals lack defined objectives, they are more vulnerable to discouragement. Minor setbacks feel overwhelming because there is no long-term structure to support resilience. In contrast, a person with a defined goal interprets setbacks differently. A failed attempt becomes feedback. A slow month becomes adjustment. A mistake becomes data. Is this mindset automatic? No, it must be trained. Zig frequently discussed the importance of repetition. Writing goals once is insufficient. Reviewing them daily strengthens commitment. He recommended carrying written goals physically. This practice may appear simple, but he argued that visibility maintains focus. During interviews, he sometimes explained that goals should be written in positive language and present tense. Why? Because language shapes perception. If the mind repeatedly reads a goal framed as possible and active, belief increases. At the same time, he warned against unrealistic fantasy. Goals must stretch ability, but they must remain attainable through disciplined effort. Unrealistic targets create frustration. Balanced targets create motivation. As his philosophy matured, he integrated several interconnected elements: clarity, consistency, attitude, service. He emphasized that success without service lacks sustainability. If your objective benefits only yourself, motivation weakens over time. But when your goals include helping others, energy multiplies. He often shared a principle that later became one of his most famous teachings. You can have everything in life you want if you will just help enough other people get what they want. This was not a sentimental statement. It was strategic. By focusing on value creation, long-term success becomes more stable. At conferences, he sometimes paused and asked audiences reflective questions. What do you truly want? Have you written it clearly? Are your daily habits aligned with it? These questions forced listeners to confront inconsistency. Alignment became a central theme in his teaching. Goals must align with daily behavior. If someone claims to value growth but avoids effort, misalignment exists. If someone claims to want fluency in English but rarely practices, the outcome is predictable. Zig also introduced the concept of incremental progress. Large transformations rarely occur instantly. They occur through repeated small actions. He compared goal achievement to constructing a building. Each brick seems small, but without consistent placement, the structure never appears. By the early 1970s, Zig Ziglar was no longer merely a motivational voice. He had become a structured thinker. His seminars combined storytelling with practical strategy. His tone remained optimistic, but his message demanded responsibility. He did not promise effortless success. He promised predictable improvement for those willing to apply disciplined effort. Critics sometimes argued that positive thinking oversimplified reality. Zig responded calmly. He did not deny hardship. He had lived through loss and rejection, but he maintained that mindset determines response. Response determines trajectory. This stage of his life marked a turning point. His ideas about goal setting were no longer personal tools. They were public doctrine. They were being adopted by corporations, sales organizations, and individuals seeking direction. And at the center of this doctrine stood a concise, yet powerful statement. A goal properly set is halfway reached. This statement was not a slogan. It was the distilled result of observation, experimentation, and lived experience. It summarized decades of trial and refinement. But the philosophy was not complete yet. It would continue evolving as Zig's influence expanded globally. The next phase of his journey would test whether these principles could sustain long-term impact beyond the business world. By the mid-1970s, Zig Ziglar had become a recognizable figure in the world of motivation and corporate training. His seminars were no longer small gatherings. Large conference halls filled with professionals seeking clarity and direction. His books began reaching wider audiences. His voice, confident and energetic, carried not only optimism but structured thinking. However, greater influence brought greater responsibility. When a message reaches thousands, it must withstand deeper examination. Zig understood this. It was no longer enough to inspire temporarily. His philosophy had to produce sustainable results. he began refining his approach further. In earlier years, he emphasized the power of positive thinking. Now he connected positivity to disciplined structure. Optimism without planning could fade quickly, but optimism combined with written goals, measurable steps, and daily habits created momentum. He often explained that success is not accidental, and failure is rarely sudden. Both are cumulative. They grow slowly through repeated behavior. Consider this question. If someone neglects improvement for months, does failure appear instantly? No, it develops gradually. The same is true for progress. Small daily investments accumulate quietly until visible transformation appears. This long-term perspective became central to his teaching. During workshops, he sometimes asked participants to estimate how many written goals they had maintained consistently over 5 years. The room often grew silent. Many people had started enthusiastically but stopped after several weeks. Why does consistency break down? Is it lack of ability or lack of sustained focus? Zig believed most individuals possessed enough ability. What they lacked was structured commitment. Motivation, he often said, is like bathing. It works, but it must be repeated regularly. He integrated humor into serious lessons. Humor lowered defenses and made complex ideas approachable. Yet behind the laughter, his message remained disciplined and firm. He also expanded his thinking beyond business achievement. Family relationships, personal integrity, and spiritual growth became part of his broader framework. He argued that success cannot be compartmentalized. Professional progress without personal balance leads to instability. As his global travel increased, he encountered diverse audiences. Cultural differences existed, yet human concerns remained similar. People everywhere worried about direction, self-doubt, and missed potential. This reinforced his belief that goal setting is universal. Regardless of country or profession, clarity improves performance. He also began addressing the psychological dimension of self-image more explicitly. How individuals see themselves determines how they act. If a person internally identifies as average, behavior often remains average. If a person begins identifying as capable of growth, behavior gradually aligns with that belief. Is self-image change immediate? No. It requires repetition and reinforcement. Zig encouraged listeners to monitor their internal dialogue carefully. Negative self-talk often operates quietly. A person might repeatedly think, "I am not disciplined," without recognizing the pattern. Over time, that thought solidifies into identity. To counter this, he recommended intentional language. Replace "I cannot" with "I am learning." Replace "I always fail" with "I am improving." Language alone does not solve problems, but it shapes perception, and perception influences effort. During this period, his famous statement about properly set goals gained widespread recognition. It resonated because it captured both simplicity and strategy. Setting a goal properly means defining it clearly, writing it down, attaching a timeline, and aligning daily behavior with it. Halfway reached does not mean guaranteed success. It means the most critical barrier, indecision, has been removed. Indecision consumes energy. Clarity liberates it. Yet Zig also faced personal challenges. Continuous travel was exhausting. Public speaking demanded emotional energy. Maintaining authenticity while repeating similar themes required discipline. He committed himself to ongoing learning to avoid stagnation. He read extensively. He studied leadership trends. He updated examples in his speeches to remain relevant. Growth, he believed, must be continuous, especially for those teaching growth. At times, critics dismissed motivational speaking as superficial. Zig responded indirectly through substance. His seminars included practical worksheets. Participants left with written action plans. He insisted on measurable outcomes. In interviews, he sometimes reflected on his early days selling cookware. Those years of rejection had trained him in resilience. Without them, his later confidence might have lacked depth. Hardship had given his message credibility. Looking back, one might ask, would he have become the same leader without early adversity? Probably not. Adversity had forced discipline. Discipline had created clarity. Clarity had created philosophy. By the late 1980s, Zig Ziglar was not merely a speaker. He was an institution. His books were translated. His seminars influenced generations of sales professionals and entrepreneurs. Yet the core remained unchanged. Define your objective. Commit to daily action. Serve others. Maintain constructive attitude. These principles, though simple, required consistent execution. And through decades of refinement, Zig proved that philosophy is only powerful when practiced. The salesman had become a global teacher. The teacher had become a symbol of structured optimism. And the idea that a properly defined goal moves you halfway toward achievement had become part of modern success vocabulary. As Zig Ziglar moved into the later decades of his career, his message gained a deeper tone. The energetic salesman and corporate trainer had evolved into a reflective mentor. His voice still carried enthusiasm, but it was now balanced with perspective. Years of experience had refined his thinking. By this stage, he had spoken to millions of people worldwide. His books had influenced entrepreneurs, students, executives, and families. Yet he did not present himself as someone who had arrived. Instead, he often described himself as a continual student. Why would a globally recognized speaker still consider himself a learner? Because growth, he believed, never ends. In interviews during the later years of his life, Zig frequently returned to foundational themes: integrity, consistency, and disciplined goal setting. But his emphasis shifted slightly. Early in his career, he focused heavily on achievement. Later, he focused equally on character. He realized something important. Achievement without character is unstable. It may produce short-term recognition, but it does not sustain respect. As he reflected on decades of speaking, he noticed that audiences remembered stories more than statistics. They remembered moments of honesty. They remembered vulnerability. He began sharing more personal reflections. He spoke about moments of fatigue from constant travel. He spoke about balancing professional ambition with family responsibility. He spoke about faith as a stabilizing force during uncertain periods. This transparency strengthened his credibility. Was he perfect? No. Did he claim to be? Never. Instead, he modeled continual improvement. He often described success as a journey rather than a destination. The language may sound familiar, but for Zig it was literal. His life had been built through stages: childhood adversity, sales discipline, public speaking mastery, global influence. Each stage required adaptation. He encouraged listeners to accept similar evolution in their own lives. Goals that were appropriate at one age might need adjustment later. Growth requires reassessment. At conferences, he sometimes asked audiences reflective questions. Are your current goals aligned with who you have become? Or are you still chasing a vision from 10 years ago? This type of questioning elevated his message beyond basic motivation. It required introspection. As his physical energy naturally slowed with age, his mental clarity sharpened. He focused more on writing and mentoring through recorded programs. He invested time in developing structured training materials that could outlive him. Legacy became an important theme. What does it mean to leave a legacy? Is it fame? Is it financial success? Or is it impact on other people's thinking? Zig's answer leaned strongly toward impact. If his words could influence someone to set a clear goal and pursue it with discipline, he considered that meaningful. He also spoke candidly about setbacks and health challenges. Public figures often hide weakness. Zig did not. He believed authenticity strengthens connection. If people see only polished success, they may feel inadequate. But when they see struggle combined with persistence, hope becomes realistic. Throughout the later years, one idea remained constant: clarity reduces fear. He repeated his famous statement in countless seminars: a goal properly set is halfway reached. Yet now he explained it with greater nuance. Halfway reached does not mean the outcome is guaranteed. It means that the psychological barrier of indecision has been crossed. Indecision drains mental energy. Clarity organizes it. He described goal setting as a mental contract with oneself. When written clearly and reviewed consistently, it shapes daily behavior subconsciously. Without that contract, effort becomes scattered. He often compared life to navigation. A ship without coordinates drifts with the current. A ship with defined coordinates may still encounter storms, but it maintains direction. Which ship arrives more reliably? The metaphor resonated with audiences because it reflected reality. External circumstances are rarely controllable. Internal direction is. In later speeches, he emphasized balance more than ever. Ambition must coexist with ethics. Achievement must align with values. If success damages relationships or integrity, it loses meaning. This broader view distinguished him from purely performance-driven motivational figures. He advocated success that integrates professional growth, personal responsibility, and service. Looking back at his journey, one might ask, was Zig Ziglar primarily a salesman, a speaker, or a philosopher? Perhaps he was all three. His sales experience taught him discipline. His speaking career amplified his message. His reflections shaped philosophy. By the time he reached the final phase of his life, his influence extended beyond business. Educators used his principles in classrooms. Leaders referenced his statements in strategy meetings. Individuals replayed his recordings during moments of doubt. His message endured because it was practical. It did not depend on trends. It depended on principles, clear goals, consistent effort, constructive attitude, service-oriented thinking. These ideas are not revolutionary in complexity. They are revolutionary in execution. As his life slowed, he continued encouraging others to define their direction clearly. He knew that confusion wastes time. He knew that discipline builds confidence. And above all, he knew from personal experience that adversity can become preparation when paired with clarity. His later years did not diminish his conviction. They deepened it. The young boy who once walked uncertain roads had become a voice of structured optimism, and the philosophy he developed through decades of experience remained centered on one enduring truth. When your goal is properly defined, you are no longer drifting. You are already on the path. As Zig Ziglar entered the final chapter of his life, his legacy was already secure. Decades of speaking, writing, mentoring, and training had established him as one of the most recognizable voices in modern motivational thought. Yet what makes a legacy truly lasting? Is it the number of books sold? The size of the audiences? Or is it something quieter and more enduring? For Zig, legacy was not measured only in applause. It was measured in transformation. He believed the true impact of his work could be seen in individuals who made different decisions because of clarity. People who wrote down goals instead of postponing them. People who changed internal dialogue from doubt to discipline. People who shifted from vague ambition to defined direction. Throughout his later seminars, he increasingly emphasized integration. Success, he explained, must not exist in isolation. It must align with character, relationships, and service. Achievement without integrity eventually collapses. Achievement with integrity becomes sustainable. Why does integrity matter so much in long-term success? Because reputation compounds just like habits. Trust, once built consistently, opens doors. But trust once broken closes them permanently. Zig often spoke about aligning private behavior with public message. Consistency between the two builds credibility. He also reflected frequently on the theme of identity. Early in his career, he focused on behavior. Later, he addressed identity more directly. If someone identifies as disciplined, disciplined behavior becomes natural. If someone identifies as inconsistent, inconsistency repeats. So the deeper question becomes, who do you believe you are becoming? This question moves beyond goal setting into self-definition. Goals describe what you want to achieve. Identity describes who you intend to become. Zig integrated both ideas. He encouraged audiences not only to define targets, but to define character traits that support those targets. If your goal is professional excellence, your identity must include preparation, honesty, and responsibility. If your goal is improved English fluency, your identity must include persistence and daily practice. In interviews, he occasionally reflected on how adversity shaped him. The early loss of his father and sister had introduced him to fragility. Sales rejection had introduced him to resilience. Public speaking had introduced him to influence. Each stage contributed to his philosophy. Would he have developed the same clarity without hardship? It is unlikely. Adversity forced introspection. Introspection produced structure. Structure produced philosophy. As his physical health declined in his later years, he reduced travel but continued communicating through recordings and written materials. He understood that influence does not depend solely on physical presence. Ideas, once articulated clearly, can travel independently. This awareness influenced how he framed his message in the final stage of his career. He simplified language further. He repeated core principles consistently. He avoided unnecessary complexity. His aim was not to impress intellectually, but to ensure practical application. He often returned to the foundational statement that had become synonymous with his name: a goal properly set is halfway reached. In these later years, he unpacked the statement with greater subtlety. Halfway reached does not imply ease. It implies commitment. The moment a goal is clearly defined, written, and internalized, hesitation decreases. Energy becomes organized. Decisions become filtered through the objective. Consider how many individuals delay important action simply because they have not defined their intention precisely. Indecision generates friction. It consumes attention. It creates anxiety. Clarity reduces friction. Clarity channels attention. Clarity stabilizes emotion. Zig believed that mental order precedes external order. When the mind knows its direction, behavior aligns more naturally. He also emphasized that goals must remain dynamic. Life's circumstances evolve. Priorities shift. A goal that once represented ambition may later represent imbalance. Periodic reassessment prevents stagnation. This willingness to reassess distinguishes disciplined growth from rigid obsession. In reflective moments, he acknowledged that no philosophy eliminates difficulty. Setbacks remain part of life. Markets fluctuate. Health changes. Relationships require effort. However, defined direction improves response quality. Instead of reacting impulsively, a person with defined objectives evaluates options in relation to long-term goals. Does this decision support my objective? Does this habit strengthen or weaken my direction? These internal questions function like a compass. By the end of his life, Zig Ziglar was no longer simply teaching sales performance. He was articulating a philosophy of intentional living. Intentional living requires awareness. Awareness requires reflection. Reflection requires honesty. His message matured from energetic motivation to structured reflection. In assessing his overall influence, it becomes clear that his enduring power did not lie in dramatic rhetoric. It lay in repeatable principles. His framework was not complicated. It was structured around definable goals, disciplined habits, constructive attitude, and service orientation. The simplicity of the structure made it adaptable across industries and cultures. As his life concluded, the themes remained steady. Define your direction clearly. Write it. Review it. Act consistently. Serve others while advancing yourself. The young boy from Alabama who once walked uncertain roads had transformed into a global advocate for structured optimism. His early adversity did not limit him. It prepared him. His sales career did not confine him. It trained him. His speaking platform did not inflate him. It refined him. In the end, his philosophy can be summarized not merely as motivation, but as disciplined clarity. And that clarity continues influencing those willing to apply it. The statement remains concise, but its implications are profound. When a goal is properly set, it removes indecision. It organizes effort. It aligns behavior. It initiates momentum. In that sense, halfway is not about distance traveled. It is about direction secured. And direction secured is often the most difficult step of all.